afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to today's unique interaction with the Executive Committee of India2022. For those who are not familiar with who we are, Xynteo is a global advisory firm working to advance new growth models. Our core initiative in India is India2022, a coalition of global and Indian businesses committed to create impact through collaboration. India2022 has 9 partners: Shell, Hindustan Unilever, Hindalco, the Aditya Birla Group, Cyient, Technip FMC, Baker Hughes, Tata Trust, State Bank of India, and WPP. We develop and deliver projects across 4 national priority verticals: energy, waste to value, healthcare, and sustainable mining. Our mission is to create proof points for a new growth model for India by 2022, the 75th year of India's independence. Our panelists today are the backbone for all the work and innovation we do. Collectively, they represent the most critical sectors. Over the course of this hour, we will get rapid and deep insights on how these vital sectors are evolving, given recent challenges. India has been in lockdown mode for 2 months. In just a few days, we hope for some of this to ease. We ask, what does this mean for the economy, for business, for us, civil society at large? And we consider how would we like to recover and what the new normal for us going forward will be. And finally, when the dust settles, what will this recovered state look like? With this context, we turn to today's discussion, Recover Better, Emergence of a New Normal. To help us explore these questions, I warmly welcome our inimitable panel: Sanjeev Mehta from Hindustan Unilever, Harry Breckelmans from Shell, Satish Pai from Hindalco, Krishna Boranapu from Cyient, Cbl Srinivas from WPP, and Oswald from Xynteo. I am delighted to moderate the session today, and together with you, our esteemed guests, look forward to learning from our leaders. A quick word on Q&A. Please feel free to ask questions in the chat box you see on your screens. We will aim to address these towards the end of the session. Getting started then, one of the companies which has swiftly reinvented itself in the wake of COVID-19 to ensure maximum reach of essential products is Hindustan Unilever Limited. To share learnings from the HUL experience firsthand, I am delighted we have Mr. Sanjeev Mehta, Chairman and Managing Director of HUL, President Unilever South Asia, and Chair of the India2022 Coalition with us. Sanjeev, your stance through this crisis has been that we can emerge from it stronger and wiser. What are some early trends you are seeing on how this new normal is emerging, and what can we expect to see in India?
Thank you, Subha. First, good afternoon, everyone, and I hope you and your loved ones are safe. You know, as professional managers, we have been trained to do risk assessment. We've been trained to work out mitigation strategies. But neither we, nor have I heard of any government, nor any business corporation, nor any consultants, even the likes of McKinsey or BCG, has ever envisaged the world could be brought down to its knees the way it has been done. Today is my start of my 11th week of working from home. At HUL, we started much before the national lockdown. So I start with a feeling of gratitude that I, my immediate family, thousands of people who work for us, and very importantly, that the number of people infected in India are still just about 140,000, considering our population density and our fragile healthcare. And even when one looks at it from the number of deaths that have taken place in India because of COVID, while even one death is one too many, but under this grave circumstances, 4,000 deaths can be labeled as contained. You know, if we go back to mid of Feb, I still recall that the number of cases in India and in the US were very similar. Yeah, we had just about under 10 cases. And look at the scenario now, the richest nation in the world, the number of deaths are slowly creeping up to the 100,000 mark. So from a perspective of saving lives, I think full credit to the government, because they were very decisive in closing down the borders, locking down the country. And I believe now a similar kind of resolve should be shown to stop the economy from stalling. Of course, a big risk, together with the supply side crisis, is the demand stagnating and the breakdown in the credit line. So there is a big risk, but I would still, being a born optimist, believe that do not take recession risk as a foregone conclusion. Yeah. Today, there are all sorts of people doling out GDP growth or the negative growth projections. In truth, the projections and indices will never be, which are never reliable in the calmest of times. They become even more dubious now when we don't know the trajectory of the virus or the effectiveness of containment of efforts till the vaccine is developed. So I would say, please don't panic and don't get carried away by the negative projections. Now, from all my conversations, including from very senior people in WHO, it is very apparent that if a vaccine is developed by 2021, it would be no mean achievement. Therefore, we have to, in many ways, accept this virus will remain for some time. But as a country, we cannot remain in perpetual lockdown. Yeah, we have to move forward. This would mean opening up the economy, but in a calibrated fashion, just like we have done in HUL. But there will be certain non-negotiables. The government will have to increase the number of testing, have a sound infrastructure for contact tracing, and keep building the health infrastructure. On the other hand, for us as individuals, as business entities, schools, building societies, we will have to follow social distancing, washing hands at frequent interval, and wearing a mask, not just to protect ourselves, but to protect others. From a Hindustan Unilever lens, the priorities that we are focusing on are very simple, but very pertinent. First is safety of our people. Second is getting the supply lines going. Third is getting a deep understanding of what is happening to the demand, the fears of the people, their apprehensions, their perceptions, their changing needs. The fourth one is, how do we engage with the community and make a difference to them? And last but not the least, we may be a cash-rich company, but we have brought in heightened focus to cash and liquidity. So with this preamble, Subha, I'll hand it over back to you, and I would be very happy to take any questions later on from the audience.
Thank you very much for sort of giving us a clear view of today, but also some insight into what tomorrow could look like, that it could be positive, but to be handled with care. I turn to you now, Harry, if I may. Who better than the Projects and Technology Director and a member of the Executive Committee at Royal Dutch Shell to reflect on the energy sector? Two questions for you. What adaptations are you seeing to accelerate the turnaround of the sector and the ongoing clean energy transition? And more broadly, do you think the pandemic has provided a renewed shared cost for humanity, reinforced the need for collaborative approaches perhaps?
Thank you, Subhashini. And let me try and answer these difficult questions also to some extent through a European lens. And same time start with extending a little bit from where Sanjeev was with respect to the sort of nearer term impact and the immediate impact the COVID crisis has had on our company. And I'd like to start that by saying that it has had a devastating effect on the company itself in the context of losing half our market cap. Which at the scale of our company is of course a very significant impact. We have had to decide to reduce significantly the dividend to our shareholders, which had not happened since the Second World War. And so I feel distinctly accountable and also in a very unique position to have had to do that. Of course that is a decision you never take lightly. In addition to the decisions we took with respect to near-term cash-related resilience measures, very much also along the lines is what Sanjeev explained. The cash preservation resilience of the company is absolutely fundamental to the near as well as the medium and long-term future of it. But all that, of course, one could argue is simply just a paper exercise. Market caps do change rapidly and significantly over time, and as a company we're confident that to a large extent we can regain that. what is far more pressing, important, and present is the impact it has had on people's lives. And so like Sanjeev, I'm now in my 10th week, I think, of working from home. At peak, we have something like 80,000 people connected every day. But those are just the people working from home. We also have tens of thousands of people still out there in the front line, providing basic services to communities and societies, which is hugely important, but also very challenging in the current environment. We have lost 5 colleagues to date as a result of the virus, which of course is very tragic for the families. And then of course a number of other people suffered the virus, but fortunately we survived. But this is only the end of the beginning. So again, to Sanjeev's words, we're going to have to find a new normal, and my sense is that new normal will not be in any way like the normal of the past. But I would still like to go back to the past for a little while, to time before COVID, December 2019. And many of you recall that at that point, the EU announced the new Green Deal. The new Green Deal was the commitment of the European Union to build a climate neutral economy by 2050. And in doing that, it was at that point the largest sort of trade, economic, but also social bloc globally to make that commitment. And that commitment actually was underpinned by quite a detailed understanding of what needed to be done to get there. And whilst still not entirely ratified by all the member states, the large majority at this point has somehow or other found a way to ratify it, up to countries like the Netherlands and UK, who have firmly committed to it and are in the process of now turning this into law. And the EU's intent is to actually have a climate law that enshrines that commitment within the legal construct. And given the importance and the strength of the legal construct, that actually is a very, very deep binding commitment to deliver on that climate neutral economy by 2050. The main planks of that commitment are involving energy, they're involving transport, they're involving the built environment, and they're involving food and agriculture. And in energy, we include heavy industry. So in all that, it's pretty much covering all the economic activity in the Union. And as much as that, it is a very comprehensive package that aims to deliver that climate neutral economy. The aggregate emissions of the European Union at this point in time are around about 4.5 to 5 gigatons, which are around about 8% of the total global emissions. Arguably, of course, that's not the lion's share, but it's a very important part of it. Also, in as much as trying to be the trailblazer for much of what we expect the rest of the world to do. The lion's share of that is energy. So as an energy company, we are global, but of course we have a significant European footprint. This is a hugely important commitment. And amongst others, as a result of that, I met together with a number of other business leaders in January in Davos with the European Commissioner for Climate and Energy, Mr. Timmermans. He's a very, very intense, energetic, enthusiastic individual. He's also very competent, and he has made this his mission. And it was very, very evident from our conversation in Davos that he had on his mind ways to achieve this, but also very clearly understanding that this was not for him alone to deliver. Besides the support from member states, he needed to have the broader support from society, and he needed to have the support from business. So we had a very, very energized session of about an hour and a half, exchanging ideas on how we could turn this into a reality. And I must say, this is not the typical experience when one goes to Brussels. We all walked away feeling very, very encouraged by the poise, the deliberateness, and the energy that he was exercising, he was projecting into the room, and his open-mindedness around saying, come forward with your ideas, because I'm ready and I'm here to support you in realizing these ideas. And I very much realize and understand that what we're aiming for here is a systems transformation. I'm not expecting you to come up with smart and clever tools or products in their own right that are going to do this trick. I very much would appreciate you telling me the hard and the cold truth around, the transformation we need to turn industrial systems, customer demand, and the many things upon which our societies hinge, to amount to collaborative exercises that are going to run across multi-decades and needing significant investment rather than a quick fix. I'm a realist, but I'm also an optimist. And so coming forward, ideas around the bioeconomy and the use of hydrogen and the inclusion of more renewables in the mix, I think they found a willing ear with Commissioner Timmermans. And so we all walked away very optimistically and ready to actually go and deliver and develop the plans and then operationalize and execute. And then, of course, COVID came. And currently, of course, the interesting question for Europe, as much as it is in other countries and other blocs, is so what is it now with your commitments? Are you going to waver? Are you going to deliberate and delay? Are you maybe going to sort of say all bets are off? Or are you going to double down and make sure you deliver this even faster? And are you even more poised and determined now to transform the economy in whatever this normal is? Because in as much as it isn't challenging, it is also an opportunity. My sense is that we are at crossroads. And of course, when you read the papers and listen to the discourse in Europe, what one is hearing is two things. One, we need a significant recovery package. Sanjeev actually spoke about the economic implications. Indeed, they are incredibly hard to fathom. But if you ask me today, I'm rather pessimistic about it. We as a company look, specifically at our industry, but also beyond that, and see over the next 2 or 3 years a significantly challenged economy that will impact all sorts of demand, particularly in heavy industry and in energy. So whilst we may be hardest hit or amongst the hardest hit, we're certainly not the only ones. And so the European Union is talking about a recovery package of about 2 trillion. Mr. Timmermans has at his disposal about 1 trillion in a period of about 10 years. The 2 trillion recovery package is over a period of about 7 years. And so we're looking here at 3 trillion against an overall budget, annual budget in the EU of around 17 trillion. So this is all within the means of the Union. But nonetheless, it's a very significant sum. And even in the Union, you can only spend €1 once. So we are faced with some really hard challenges here. Are we going to be investing this in a near-term recovery that simply just secures jobs and maintains the status quo? Or are we going to invest these funds into transforming the economy here and now to make sure we do 2 things? We provide jobs and sustenance for people, but we also do what we need to do to become a climate neutral economy. And if you ask me now, I think the likelihood of the latter is higher than the former. I think we cannot underestimate the commitment that politicians have made, that governments have signed up to, and that individuals want. We cannot underestimate the strength of the judiciary and the desire to turn this into law, and the fact that civil society will actually use the law to eventually get there. We are seeing this in every country in Western Europe, where legal instruments are being used to make the government do what they committed to. And so on account of that commitment and those instruments, I think actually the European Union will choose to do the latter. They will want to see these investments invested wisely and to move forward. That will not be straightforward. We all know at the moment of the standoffs we see between the North and the South, the rich and the somewhat less rich. So this will be very tough in the coming 24 months. But I think we will end up in a place where all of us will be committed and aligned around doing what we need to do, which is to drive for a climate neutral economy by 2050. We as a company only 4 weeks ago committed to that same goal, because we felt we needed not only focus on the short term, we needed to also show our commitment to the long term. And with us have joined BP, Eni, Equinor, Repsol, and so all the European energy companies have committed to something similar. And that just shows that I think business is going to be the trailblazer for this new economy and this new normal in energy, but not only in energy, because many of the companies around us, including some of yours, have committed to the same, and I'm sure are going to be blazing their trail on behalf of the rest of society. In the last couple of months, a number of companies have made commitments in Europe around driving for the hydrogen economy, around driving for the bioeconomy, around driving for carbon capture and storage, and all those system level changes that we need to drive for a cleaner and more sustainable economy. So I'm convinced that we will see Europe actually emerge out of this as a trailblazer, as it should be. But also I'm very, very much convinced and very hopeful with respect to the solutions we're seeing emerge in Europe to actually be helping us greatly in the context of India 2022 to drive not only the energy and energized track, but also very much and deeply the energized track, in the sense that, and we'll be hearing more about that later, that we'll be driving bioeconomy, that we will be driving the use of CO2 through carbon capture and the use of CO2 and storage, and through the use of hydrogen and a variety of other low carbon and clean energy related solutions. And so actually I am at this point hopeful, optimistic. I'm still a realist. I'm not naive. You know, we'll have to get through this and it's going to be very painful and very challenging. But I'm also very optimistic that at the end of all this, there is actually a better world. And we are going to be a significant part of that better world. That will be my commitment. So Suba, I think with that, maybe a good point to hand back to you. If there are questions, happy to take them later or whenever you create the opportunity for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Harry, for all of those deep insights and to give us the European perspective. Clearly interesting times ahead. Our next speaker brings perspectives to a sector that has had to create swift impact during these times, healthcare. Warm welcome to Mr. Krishna Bodanapu, Managing Director and CEO, Xynt. Krishna, really two questions for you. The preparedness of an investment into the medtech and healthcare sector has been brought to the forefront through this period. What are the big changes that are expected to prevail into the future? And we'd also love to hear how businesses like Xynt are pivoting in focus and strategy to respond to these emerging opportunities and needs.
Thank you, Subhashini. Needless to say, it's been a very interesting few weeks or few months now, I guess, with what has happened in the world. And I think to Sanjeev's earlier point, nobody really predicted, as much as we all did scenario plannings and business continuity, et cetera, et cetera. I don't think anybody predicted that we would be dealing with the level of uncertainty and the level of crisis that we've all dealt with. But I think a few things have emerged in this rather interesting situation. And let me first talk about the question you asked about healthcare, because obviously that's the forefront of the crisis that we all face. And I think it's been quite interesting in terms of the preparedness of the global healthcare systems in terms of able to address this crisis. Even a few days ago, there's been a conversation going on from somebody who is quite senior in the New York City healthcare system that they don't have enough ventilators and they need ventilators and manufacturing of ventilators, and all sorts of ideas are being floated around how New York City can get a number of hundreds of thousands of ventilators literally. But having said that, I also feel that there is a bit of overreaction that has happened in the medical field, both in terms of hospitals and also in terms of the care that's being provided, because ultimately I feel that there are a number of technologies and there's access to a number of technologies which have really helped us manage the problem a lot better than what it could have been. And tying some of this to the initiative that Xynt is a part of with Xynteo on the India 2020 track, or India 2022 track, sorry, is one of the things that we realized, for example, and I'll talk about this in the Indian context, given that that's been our focus. One of the things is that we realized that to contain something like this, especially in a country like India, the capability and capacity that is available in the rural primary healthcare systems becomes very, very important, because really they are the forefront of addressing the COVID challenge, especially for a majority of Indians, given that India is still 70–75% primarily rural. So what we've seen is, for example, you take a state like Kerala, which has a fairly advanced healthcare system and a primary healthcare system. They've been able to flatten the curve a lot more effectively than many other states. And they've been able to address the COVID challenge a lot more effectively than any other state. So one thing that reiterates my belief on especially the work that we're doing together is we need to strengthen the capability and the competence of the primary healthcare system in India. And I believe and how that happens is through technology. Ultimately, by putting the devices and the technology in the hands of the frontline workers, we can make them more efficient. We can help them deal with a lot of these situations up front, and therefore we can help them address and tackle the situation a lot better. For example, one of our partners in this healthcare track is a company called Malbio. Malbio was making TB detection devices, and very quickly they were able to repurpose some of the equipment and some of the test strips that they have to detect COVID, right? Again, it's really calibration against certain streams and so on and so forth, and they had to work quite a bit with the center in Pune to make sure that they had the right calibration techniques, etc. But that was a great example of repurposing technology very quickly to address the challenge on hand and to really address the opportunity in some cases on hand. And we've been, they're a part of the healthcare track. We also manufacture a number of devices for them. So they've been doubling down on the number of devices that they've been putting out in the field and the usage and so on and so forth. So net, I would say, is the adoption of technology. I think the reality is, and somebody, I read somewhere this morning that somebody in WHO said the coronavirus is just the tip of the iceberg in terms of the new viruses that will surface over the next few years. I hope that's not true, but let's assume for a second, even if that is true, the only way that we can rapidly address these things is by leveraging technology to test a lot more, hopefully to also address the symptoms and so on and so forth, because unless we're able to put the ability to test, the ability to take precautions, the ability to take at least to treat early symptoms in the hands of multitudes of people, not just in all sort of the consumer's hands or the user's hands, but also in the hands of the frontline healthcare workers, I think we will have a significant challenge on how just the world is going to evolve, and if this hypothesis that there's a lot more of this coming comes true. Therefore, I'd say, I'll summarize that by saying I think there are a number of examples of how technology has been leveraged effectively in the healthcare system, especially in the India context, and I hope to see a lot of that more, because that's the only way that we can effectively sort of take this fight back to the virus and make sure that we address the situation on hand. So the second part of your question, Subhashini, in terms of how companies like Cyient have addressed the challenge, we have a little bit of an advantage, I'd say, given that we are a technology services company. So one is hopefully we use technology effectively, but secondly is also that given that a lot of it is services, which means that we don't necessarily have a lot of people on the field or in sort of the field or doing field-related work. So today we have 96% of our workforce which are working from home. And I think equally interestingly is the efficiency of that workforce. We believe that, the 95% of the people are working at 95% efficiency. That did not start that way. I would say when we started working from home around the 20th of March, we had a much smaller number working from home, but more importantly, the efficiency was terrible. But I think people are adopting to the new reality. People are adopting to the ability to work from home. I think people are becoming more effective working from home. And also that's created a lot of other benefits, honestly. I believe that there is a significant impact that this will have on the quality of life of people. The average commute for our employees in most urban cities in India, primarily we are in Delhi, Hyderabad, Bangalore, and Pune, was an hour and a half. Today, that hour and a half has been cut down to essentially zero. and people are really been able to, hopefully, especially once the world opens up. Obviously, now we are still in a unique situation, but once the world opens up, people will be able to work, or people will be able to dedicate some of this time, or put in some of this time towards having a better quality of life. So I feel that it's been a unique challenge. Our business, just like other businesses, will see a significant impact. But I'll say to what Harry was saying, I think we will recover. And just being an optimist like the others, I think we will recover. I think the recovery, if we do the right things, the recovery will be better than what the world was and what our life was before this. And therefore, I think we just need to focus on how things change, and therefore how can we position ourselves better in terms of ability to work more effectively, to take some of the time that we've saved, to take some of the resources that we save and put it back into the quality of our work. On a lighter vein, I'll say that I haven't worked very much from home because I had to compete with an 8-year-old on who gets the desk space and who gets, if I could project my presentations on the computer or if she could watch TV. So I gave up and I've worked from office for most of this time, which was allowed in Hyderabad under certain conditions. But I feel that a lot of people have really benefited, and this is the new reality that we will have to deal with. With that, I'll turn it back to you, Subhashini. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Krishna. So clearly, low-cost technological solutions will be a key going forward, and some interesting perspectives there on new ways of working. Thank you. Moving on then to the metals and mining sector, which has been amongst essential services operating throughout the lockdown, showing resilience and responsibility in dealing with new challenges, but never stopping, as over 1 billion people remain in lockdown. We are fortunate to have with us Mr. Satish Pai, Managing Director, Hindalco Industries today. Satish, one question for you. From your vantage point, what does the new operational reality look like, and how, in your view, will businesses evolve in the future?
I think that, we were classified as a essential industry because we are a continuous process, and all the smelters and refineries and large part of our 50,000 workforce, we kept them running. Now we discovered that we are essential, but also that the virus survives the least on copper surfaces for less than 2 hours, and after that aluminium comes in with about 3 to 4 hours. So from a pharmaceutical point of view, which uses aluminium for packaging of medicines, to food packaging, there was quite a demand. So that kept the aluminium and copper as essential services and running. So what did we learn from an operations point of view? So in some ways, the first 50 days, we isolated the plants because our plants were in fairly remote places. So we managed to keep a very tight process where we took most of our workers within the plant boundaries, and we managed to keep all our operations running. For me now, the most difficult part is just starting, because as you open up, we now have a lot more people going in and out of the plants. So we have spent the last 2 or 3 weeks now coming up with many new processes, because how do truck drivers who come in and out of the plants, how do we make sure it's a contactless process? How do we make sure that the sanitization is maintained? How do we make sure that the drivers coming in are coming from safe areas? And if one gets, how can we trace it back? Now we have migrant workers going back to the villages around our plants in UP, Odisha. So we now have, along with the villagers, a tracking mechanism, because many of them are bringing the coronavirus into the remote parts of India, which so far had been clean. I mean, we have had large parts of our plants where, we have absolutely no one who has been impacted. So in many ways, the step from this point onwards, as the country opens up, which it has to open up, as many of you have said, this is where the things get for us much tougher. So the things we are learning, besides the normal sanitization, social distancing, is that the work processes are having to be adapted. A normal way, 3 shifts in a factory work, how do the maintenance gets done, all these processes now, a lot of digitization and automation is coming in so that you can reduce the number of people in close proximity. So a lot of work processes are being adapted. The second thing that has happened, which is quite interesting, and I'll share you, is like this meeting on Microsoft Teams. We have been running all our operations. We have roughly 3 operational meetings at going on during the day. The level of communication, transparency, the speed of decision making has been tremendous. So in normal times, if I sit in Bombay and say, hey, we want to do this, by the time it gets rolled down to the front line, it can take a while and a lot of things can get filtered. But what we have seen in this online way of working, when I am on with Microsoft Teams, I have 100 of the plant managers and their staff. Any decision you take is instantly executed. And anything that one plant does, the other plants immediately try to copy it if it works. So the whole new way of working that online is bringing us is that, yes, you will now have to adapt. You will have to find a mix of office come work to home. I don't think it's going to be a completely work from home or a completely office. I think it's going to be some sort of a medium depending on the type of job you're doing. So that is one thing we have to adapt. The second thing is the way you will communicate with your employees is also changing. And I think that if I can be very blunt, a lot of senior managers are now learning how to be tech savvy. The fact that, how do you get on Microsoft Teams? How do you book your own meetings? How do you handle technology? Quite a lot of senior people now have to come up to speed or they're going to become irrelevant. So these are some of the things we are doing. We are, 50,000 employees, so far so good. We have managed to keep all the plants running. I think the supply side is not a worry. For me, the demand side is the biggest worry. And like most of the other speakers who said, I think the economy needs to bounce back. And hence, we will have to open up and the commercial activity has to restart, keeping in mind that that's when the risks are going to be the highest and we need to be the most vigilant. So with that, I turn it back to you, Subhashini.
Thank you, Satish. I think one word really, truly remarkable to just keep the operations going at a time like this. Turning the spotlight on to media, and in particular digital media, good or ugly, the power of media is undeniable and ever more so in uncertain times. Our next speaker, Mr. Cbl Srinivas, Country Manager, WPP India, has a ringside view of the increasing influence of the media. Srini, a question for you really, from the perspective of responsible digital communications, what has stood out for you in the way public communications have been handled across sectors? And for those that you've supported through the crisis, what have been some of the core communications needs and design principles employed? Any shifts from the usual? That would be very interesting for our participants and certainly for me to hear.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Subhashini, and good afternoon, everybody. So like everyone said, it's been challenging, but at the same time, I think it's been very interesting and a huge amount of learning for us as WPP as we move to what we call managed remote working, actually a few days before the lockdown came into effect. For the first few days, it was, trying to put all the processes in place and get everybody to be as fired up and as creative as they normally are with their teams and groups and all of that. But I think people adapted pretty quickly and, the whole thing kind of caught on. I would like to just share quickly some of the work that we've done. Unfortunately, the only way I can do it is to just quickly describe in one line some of the campaigns, and I'm sure many of you have seen them, sitting at home over the last couple of months. And all of these were done, in a very different way. All of us working remotely. As you know, the government isn't allowing full-scale production of any kind, which means you can't make advertising, you can't do all those fancy shoots. And yet we've delivered over 200 campaigns in the last couple of months, very, very differently. To name a few, of course, starting with the Hul Unicef campaign. As you know, the two giants got together with Hul's marketing expertise and Unicef's, domain knowledge in areas like, cleanliness, sanitation, etc. So we came up with a range of films that were aired on digital and traditional media platforms. Then some of you would have seen the Make Your Own Mask campaign that we did with the Times of India group. This is done by one of our agencies, Wonderman Thompson. And then, of course, with the request that we got from the Government of India to do something very creative with celebrities, again, with a social cause and linked to COVID, Ogilvy, one of our agencies, came up with the Mask Force campaign. Since the Indian cricket team is sitting at home with nothing much to do, they all chipped in and, acted as true sports. And we got a nice campaign running, which, of course, got a lot of visibility. And there were a lot of other instances where, for example, one of our clients, which is in the liquor business, started manufacturing hand sanitizers. given the growing demand. And then we had to overnight come up with the whole concept, branding, identity, creating a packaging design, etc., etc. So it's been very interesting. Like I said, a range of campaigns, different kinds of work. If I were to kind of sum up the 5 learnings, and I think hopefully we will take all of these 5 forward in the post-COVID era. I think first and foremost, pretty much what Satish just said. I think we came together as a collective force, despite sitting in different cities and working in different companies of WPP. And I think what this last 2 months has done, I don't think any amount of putting everyone into one building would have done. So I think just coming together as one combined force, everyone helping each other, clearly came out as a big learning and a big positive. The other was the adaptation to digital platforms and technology. Like other industries, we also pretty much had the millennials and all of that who were more adept with all the techie platforms, and some of the others who were not so much. But I think we have now more or less got a base level understanding and appreciation of digital technology across all our businesses, which obviously will be helpful going forward. Thirdly, I think just bringing in speed and agility. I think all of us had become prisoners to our own bureaucracy and processes at our end, and many times at the end of at the client's end as well. But I think the last 2 months has shown that speed and agility at both sides, is possible, and a lot of the stuff a lot of the processes we had, hopefully we're going to jump for good and move into a more nimble way of working. The other thing I would say in terms of learning was, just in terms of being much more responsible as creative people, as content creators. I think the fact that we're able to create advertising and campaigns which can change behaviors, which can create a huge impact. I think a lot of that just sunk in a lot more solidly in the last 2 months. And I just hope that, as an industry, as a force, we become much more responsible, especially given so much of fake news going around, given if, there are also those who are quite alarmist about what's happening. So I think just being responsible with creative power is important. And last but not the least, I think the other big learning is frugal innovation. The fact that we couldn't shoot outside, we couldn't go to those fancy sets, we couldn't take a flight and go to South Africa and shoot a campaign there, meant we had to make do with stock footage, we had to make do with reruns, with the old campaigns that were created and which are still popular, old jingles, dust them off and build in a tweak here, build in a tweak there. And most of the stuff that you've seen over the last 2 months has come that way, and I hope we keep that going as well, because we can reinvest in areas which are needed to transform our business. So these were the 5 learnings which we hope to take forward post-COVID. But all in all, it's been a very, very interesting 2 months. Thank you, Subhashini. Back to you.
Thank you, Srini. One cannot emphasize enough the integral part of responsible behaviors and approaches to recover better. So I'm certainly glad to hear that the world of media and communications are looking at that hard and innovating. It's my great pleasure to turn to our final panelist this afternoon, a longtime champion of collaborative growth models, my colleague and dear friend, Dr. Oswald Garland, founder and chairman of Xynteo. Oswald, one question for you. The usual order in which the triple bottom line is stacked up has certainly flipped, with people and profits dwindling and the planet exhibiting early signs of gains in recent months. Do you think it is possible for businesses to adapt as they move forward and retain these good practices while pursuing economic recovery? And in what ways has our mission of creating new growth models been impacted?
Thank you very, very much, Subhashini, for that formidable question. It's great to see friends in India again, and I hope we will soon be together somehow when our troubles go away. I believe, clearly, when listening to our colleagues around the table here today, adaptation and finding ways forward is absolutely possible. I think it has been truly interesting to listen to Krishna and to see the adaptation in Satish when it comes to tempo, when it comes to Harry and the systems view. I think what we need to, number one, take as a starting point is that our problems are different now. Our situation is different. And one very important aspect of our new situation is that we are moving from individual problems to systems transformation. We need to look at the food system, the energy system, transport, and plastic, cement and steel. Because very soon, I believe that Corona is going to burn off. Here in Norway now, we are starting to go back to our offices. I think individuals are still hesitant, but we are slowly but surely coming back to normal. And then we will be straight back into the fundamental challenge we have, and that is the social fabric of our societies and a lower carbon footprint and climate change. What I also think we have seen in recent times, which gives me hope for adaptation, is the power of our new lifestyles. I spoke with Nitin Prasad, and he said that no, it's clear, we can see the skies and the blue skies. And basically our lifestyle is motivating us to carry on what we have learned in the last 2 or 3 months. Then of course we see formidable resolve in some companies, like Shell is now coming forward with the net zero carbon footprint objectives with the other companies that Harry mentioned. We see a company like Scania setting client-based targets, etc. So because our problems are different, I think we need to ask ourselves, when it comes to our leadership, what needs to be different? And I think that's a really interesting discussion. What I see and what we in Xynteo see today is that visionary leaders work to transform themselves, their organizations, and the wider system. I think that Satish made a spot on point. You see a lot of individual leaders now learning new skills. One thing is technical skills, but the other is also strategic view of how do you advance your companies to be competitive in a new situation. I think we see that the visionary leaders work on at least the three characteristics. One is they think systemically, they listen beyond the silos, and they are seeing new perspectives and finding new ways to grow their companies. Two, the leaders who I personally believe will do extremely well going forward, they also build in exceptional ways change capacity and a leadership bench. A bench that can really help them in this new reality we move into. And three, the leaders, the visionary leaders of tomorrow, they collaborate up and down the supply chain. And they think and work across sectors and silos to solve problems they can't solve alone. So from that point of view, I think that we were brave when we started India 2022. I think we have been ahead of our time. This is exactly what we are doing in this work. We are trying to see, we are trying to think systemically. We are building change capacity in our catalyst, and we are trying to work collaboratively to solve big problems. So to answer your question, Shini, I believe that we are actually in some ways short-term adapting with enormous agility. The question is, how do we come out on top when the immediate threat of Corona is behind us? I do see a different focus in those companies and those leaders who are able to do both short-term and think into the medium term. I see that companies now more and more come forward with a stakeholder view, not shareholders only. They focus on questions like future of work. How do you compose a workforce which is competitive and healthy and safe for times to come? They focus on the green transition and basically an overall deep listening to the stakeholders and how to be of service in the medium, short and long term, and by that come out with an enormous value to the world as we move forward. So thanks a lot. Great to be with you, and I hope to see you soon in person.
Thank you very much, Oswald. The questions are streaming in, and I do want to say a veritable feast of cross-sector perspectives and rich leadership insights for all of us to think about, ladies and gentlemen. And the moment I know that our panelists have been looking forward to. We are absolutely running short of time, so I'm not sure we can answer too many of these, but without further ado, may I turn to you, Sanjeev, for the first set of questions. On the back of COVID-19 related precautions, such as social distancing, do you expect quicker adoption of smart manufacturing technologies in India across the board, including the SME sector? And on the theme of doubling down on systems transformation we need, what leadership lessons can we take from COVID to better catalyze these transformations?
Yeah, let me pick up the first one. Absolutely. I believe that this is a great moment for the country to leapfrog on the technology front. Just like we have created the India stack, similarly, there has to be, and the work is on, I'm aware of it, of a health stack. And I think this is an opportunity when every person is looking from a lens of everything. Yeah, there is a great opportunity for India also from our IT sector to move up the value chain and not just do service, but move up and get into more value-added work. From an economic perspective, from an economy perspective, there couldn't have been a better opportunity than today to move up the chain from a perspective of technology and digitization. And if we look at the history of Alibaba in China in 2003, the SARS crisis gave it an impetus. Similarly, it's not going to be just restricted to the classical e-commerce companies, but it is going to impact every business in every dimension. Even a humble grocer, I believe, as I call it, it is going to be a renaissance of a grocer. And if he gets connected, yeah, we will see a magic happening to the millions of stores that dot the landscape of the country. So this is the most fertile moment. Of course, it is on us, it's on the nation to latch on to the opportunity, because with every challenge, there are opportunities lurking in the corner. Yeah, as far as systemic thinking is concerned, again, this is an outlook, this is a perspective which needs to be brought through. And as Harry and Oswald were saying, look at it from a lens of climate. I think gone are the days of procrastinations, making excuses, taking soft targets, because this is an eye-opener. And I am a born optimist, and I believe the world, humankind, will win over this and come out in a much better place. A place where we will have a lot of respect for climate and environment, a place where we have much more compassion for our fellow human beings, and a place where we will not be looking at things from our own narrow angle, but looking at it classically from a multi-stakeholder model and make this world a much better place to live in.
Thank you. Harry, if I may direct the next one. This one is for you. One of our participants references your comments on the importance of judiciary and legal instruments to hold politicians accountable and to support climate targets in Europe, and ask around the question of India. Can a country like India forge its climate path with business leading the way, or does business need to push for support from regulation, policy, and law? Your perspectives, please.
I think that's a great insight, or almost like perhaps a conclusion that I think support the. I think the governance in the European Union I would still rate as relatively effective, and so the system we have with respect to the interaction between civil society, government, and the judiciary is strong and effective. And so to that extent, I think it's a hugely important instrument. But in relation to the role of business, what I'm also seeing is that business now is erring on the side of where Sanjeev was, which is, I think being more forward-leaning in terms of doing the right thing. In some ways, people could say, essentially being proactive or preempting. governments, politicians, and the judiciary taking measures that business won't like, and now stepping ahead of that and sort of almost a self-induced accelerated move towards the future, which in my mind is a good thing. And actually, I think it's done generally with the best intent. And my sense is at this moment in time, certainly thoughtful, forward-leaning companies are doing exactly that. I've been doing rounds with a number of our suppliers and customers over the last few weeks, and I think most of them are in the same place, actually leaning forward. This is tough, this is very painful, but it is the right thing to do. It's also the right thing to do because there may not be another opportunity, and any sort of delay on the count that perhaps waiting for it is a better alternative, I think people are now realizing is in all likelihood not the right thing to do. So yes, I see business in fact stepping forward by themselves, but I would also say that I think that is also within mind that if they don't do, at some point they will be pushed to do so. So we can't neglect or ignore the importance of exactly that in the context of what I just said. Let me leave it there.
Thank you. Satish, if I may direct the next one to you. The question really is, I would like to ask, say, one of our participants, with the dismal forecast of economic growth in the short term, how can we continue to motivate the workforce?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that, as leaders, the important role we have at this time is to show people that there is light at the end of the tunnel. So I have a lot of workers who have been putting in 12-hour, 14-hour shifts for the last 2 months. And when they open the newspaper, they see all this doom and gloom news. So I think that, one of the biggest jobs that we have is to remind people that every time there is a crisis, the world, the economy, and people have bounced back. And we just have to go back in history and see all the different crises that we have. We have always bounced back. Just like the nature has bounced back. When you look outside my window in Bombay here, you see blue skies. And the only thing that has happened is that for 2 months, nobody has gone out and dirtied anything or crowded anything. So there is an inherent resilience in the system. But I think that for the employees, that the role of a senior manager like me right now is to show them that, yes, we have to dig in, do the hard stuff, work harder, but there is light at the end of the tunnel because things are going to bounce back. And that the company that you're working for has a solid balance sheet, has got good products, and companies that can make it through this crisis will emerge stronger. So I think that communication of the senior management to motivate the troops is probably the most important thing in crisis like this, because they need that motivation now to put in that extra hours of 14 hours, 16 hours to keep going. Back to you, Swash.
Thank you, Satish. We are well over the hour that we had planned. So maybe a quick question for you, Krishna, and then we'll wrap up. This one is around data. While it's immensely useful for epidemiology, there is growing concerns about privacy of an individual's health records. How can companies and governments address this issue of privacy?
I think what it comes down to is, not using individual data, but using data in its aggregation, because what we're really trying to learn is not necessarily about the individual, but the trends, and really address the trends and address the sort of the underlying reasons behind the underlying trends. So I think the key is really to look at data in its aggregation, not for any specific individual. And as long as companies follow that sort of broad principle and governments legislate around that principle, I think we can get some very good insights out of that data.
Thank you, Krishna. I think for both to our panelists and to our guests. With that then, ladies and gentlemen, we bring to close today's illuminating discourse with our India 2022 leaders. A big thank you to our panelists for their time and candid, thought-provoking remarks. I hope all of you enjoyed the session and take away some fresh thinking to consider as we navigate the new normal. This is Subhashini Chandran and the Xynteo India 2022 team signing off. Goodbye for now.